And there's actually some coverage of that. Again, this fall under one of those 20-25%. And then within that, there are a few items under it. So you do need to cover it. So again, going back to the basics, what it is, what it does, and then why you need it. So I think at a very high level, when it comes to security, especially the security operations, there is something called, this is the new name, by the way, Defender for Cloud Apps. If you see some documentation in the old days, it will be Microsoft Cloud App for Security, MCAS in short. You still have some documentation. You see that left over. If you have an old version of the books lying around, then you will see that. We're not going to use that term, but MCAS is still around for some reason because of the history. But Defender for Cloud App is a new name. Now, what it does, it basically have something called the Cloud Access Security Broker. That's the standard term used in the security and the IT field, which essentially means that if you have a shadow IT in your environment, what is the shadow IT? Shadow IT is basically you have, enterprise, and then you have users and teams. They actually spin up, like their own, I would say a mini IT. And then they'll say, well, let's say your organization using SharePoint for storing the documents, but they wanted to use something like Dropbox for that, right? For whatever reasons, and they use that. And then they start putting the documents in, and they send those links, in the URL, and maybe they're using that in the Teams also, right? So you wanted to understand what applications are there that are not tracked. Again, the idea is identify both like a SaaS-based, IaaS-based services in your organization that you don't have visibility, right? So tracking is number one, because if you track, then you can build an inventory, and then you can see which application or service is posing a risk and where are the gaps, right? Like a blind spots. Now, once you have that, right, there are a couple of things it also allow you to do, right? So sensitive information, you can classify. So you identify what information is passing through. Typically, the Cloud App Framework or the GASB in general are implemented through some sort of like a proxy. So, they sit between your environment and the cloud apps and then track what's going on. And then it basically can give you an idea that if there is something that is not classified, need to be classified, there's no tagging, it basically start highlighting. Practically speaking, if you work with the Windows environments, like a large scale enterprise, you will see that use of services and products like ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services. And then behind that, you basically have a lot of applications that still require authentication through the ADFS, and then within that there will be a range of line of business applications that don't necessarily have visibility into the cloud, right? You don't know if they exist, and that's where things start becoming interesting, right? So the Cloud Application Framework gives you that visibility. So how you do that, and there's a whole range of things. You basically have the connectors, you have a discovery feature, and then you have the installation through the proxy and the session management, right? Because whenever you establish a session with, let's say, through the cloud, you can monitor that session. And again, it will come down to the conditional access policies where you can track that. Now, what do you do with all these things, right? You're basically going to protect against a threat and anomalies. Like if there's an unusual activity happening, maybe there is a malicious attack happening because of the use of application, because of use of these services that are not tracked, then you can actually surface it up into the Cloud App through the Cloud App Framework, and then you can do something about it, right? Now, in terms of the compliance is something that is kind of like dependent on the organization. I will show you a quick demo, like how you can create alerts and then surface them up based on like your requirement. Again, I think exam doesn't want you to master every single aspect of it. I think it does require you to understand, like if you create an alert, how to investigate it, what do you do about it, and then M365 will basically portal will show you that alert. And remember we have an incident option over there. It will show up as an incident as with any other alert, right? So it's a little bit agnostic with like how it goes over there. But of course, you need to create that alert based on the need, like a compliance requirement based on the organization, right? So the Security Operations Analyst, I think the key takeaway would be that how to create that, how to investigate it, how to close it. But just knowing the capability is the first step. I will show you a few things here, like how to get there, and we're going to have a very quick demo on this. So how to get there? So again, Defender for Cloud App. If you don't see this option, you will see a link, and then you basically sign up for trial. Again, with any other thing, if you don't have access to it, just search for trial. Most of the time, I would say all the time, all the services we are covering here, the trial is available. So you go and basically get a trial. And then once you have that, then it will basically give you this portal, right? Now, again, as with the endpoint, we have some of the features will surface up in the Defender, particularly related to the incident and the alerts. And then the others would be in its own sort of like a honest viewpoint. Will give you access to its own dashboard. You can do the alert management, and then you can mark it false positive or not. So what I will do is that rather than talking about it, I will show you, and then it will be much easier to cover these things. I put them in the slide because if you're just reviewing the content, you might wanted to see what is the critical features that you wanted to go through and how they work. But I think the demo is much better practically. So let me share my screen again, and I am just going to finding the option here. Okay, so well, sometimes you have to reshare it again. All right, I think it goes through now. Okay, it will show up in a second. All right, yeah, good. All right, so assuming everyone can see it, if not, then put in the Q&A. So we'll preview it. Okay, so when you have it, right, you will have something. I will just minimize all this. Go back over here. You have the cloud apps. So this tab will show up. Now, you can expand on it, and then you have different options over here. Now, I think the most important thing that you will do is if you wanted to understand the capabilities, because this one is essentially going to be more like a high level in this view, and you basically want to track everything, and you may not actually have everything set up from here. You wanted to go and start with, like, I will start from here. I have an alert. I briefly start actually with this yesterday when we were looking into it. And then here you will have a link here that is basically going to take you to this particular endpoint. It's called the name of your tenant, whatever it is. So mine is controlsolive365.portal.cloudsecurity.com. So this is the Defender for Cloud Apps. This is the way you can actually land directly on the portal. And it actually have a, I would say, a better way right now to configure most of the options. This may change over time, right? That's, I think, the intention also to bring more and more functionalities over there. But it does give you a good view into what the core capabilities are, right? So there's a whole thing with the discovery. This is basically the shadow ID and things like that. And then there is a application that you wanted to basically enable, disable. And then there's an investigation tab. So basically you get all the activities happening. So you can see a lot of activity from my account because I'm doing so many demos right now. So you can see that, there's a log on activity. It's tracking everything, right? So remember, if you have it enabled, it's going to track. It's going to analyze all the things that are going in. If I'm working with files, I don't have a files right now. But if you do, then you do have that. Then basically give you a view into your users, security configuration, and so forth. But one of the key things that you wanted to do, and you may wanted to start with, is looking at the policies, right? And policies are essentially that going to lead to the alerts, right? Because if there's an anomaly, then a risky sign-in, or there is some other user activity criteria that you put in, and it's not really working the way that you want it to work, then you basically will come here and figure it out. So if I come here and look at this, right, so we have the risky sign-in based policy. So a lot of these policies are using, let's say, Azure Active Directory. base suspicious alert. So it can actually do cross-pollination, right? So it will have a lot of these policies already here. Now you can cherry pick and disable them, or again, this is something that you need to do based on your organization, but they're all like type of threat detection, right? They will give you that on a day one. Now, what usually you also do is you wanted to come in here, and I will just go here, and you create a policy, an access policy. Actually, go back here. I will just pick. You can create the access-based policy. For the access-based policy, you have to set up certain things. The easiest one to create is the activity-based policy, which is basically going to track activities based on all the criteria you're going to put in, right? So I actually created a few here. I will just get in and show you. This is probably the easier one to get started with. Now, this policy actually is going to track the user, right? And then it's going to surface up in this particular case, it's finding out it's Adam, but it can be other users, right? So you're basically going to have a risky sign-in, anonymous IP address. So if you're doing some Tor-based activities, so Adam is logging in with Tor browser, then it's basically going to pick it up. You can also have a more like a benign policy, right? For example, user activity. So this one actually going to capture any activity from the user, right? I just put it in like that. And then the idea here is that you don't necessarily have to resolve every single thing here, but if you want to, you can actually go in the alerts and you can say, well, I have this particular alert here. It closes the false positive, which means that it's a false positive. It's not true. It's not really a particular threat that I wanted to work on. Closes benign. So the benign threats are actually threats that exist, but they are benign, like the one that I created here. Now, this basically capture every user activity, so it's a benign. I mean, some of the activities may be positive, like this one. So you can mark it close as true positive. And when you do that, right, then you're basically saying that well, I mean, you need to work on it. Like someone need to really work on it because you're closing it. And then you close the alert here. Now, what happens is that typically, as a security ops analyst, you may wanted to drive a lot of these like through the incident pane over here. So you will see that those activities will start showing up here, like the alerts, like this one, and they're eventually going to lead to the incidents. Now, this is actually a common thread. Like, I mean, basically, alerts will surface up, they will land here, and then they become the incident, right? In this particular case, it's saying that, well, we actually do a quick demo yesterday, but basically what it does, it will tell you that there's a suspicious activity going on. And then when you click on the alert, it will give you the breakdown, like where it's coming from, what is the source, and then what you want to do with it. Now, the reason why I'm recommending you to deal with it here is mainly because when you deal with this particular incident here, you have a uniform pane, right? You're going to manage it over here. You will assign it. You will tag it. You're basically going to manage the status at single pane. That's the idea. But in order for you to actually work on it, like literally going to go and have a deeper look, you may want to come to this portal, the Cloud App Security portal. Now, it can be a little frustrating at times because you have two places to go and manage these things, and then you wanted to go and perform some sort of I will go back here. Let's go back to the policies. Yeah, you wanted to do some configuration, like edit the policy. You're basically doing it over here. I believe you can do a lot of it from here too, but if you go here, you have some control over here, but this is more governed by the app related features, right? Like app discovery, app catalog. But if you want to do like a very deep configuration on the policy, I don't think its feature parity exists here right now. So if you're doing just like a POC or just exploring, I would say just go here and go through the documentation and then just play around here. You can just create these alerts, like a policy-based alerts very easily. You can create a activity-based policy, and then you can say that I want to mark you the threat, and then you can create a filter here. Filter can be anything, can be based on the app, can be based on the device. can be based on the IP address. So this is something that you may want to play with. I mean, the one that I created was really simple. I basically said, well, if the particular user from organization or from domain, then create an alert. It's a benign alert, right? I just wanted to get like some sense of what's going on. But you can create advanced alerts, right? You can say that now I wanted to figure on the app. Which app is this, right? And you can see right over here, as soon as you bring the app into the catalog, like from the catalog is selected to monitor, then it will basically show up here. Now, again, advanced configuration, I don't think is part of this course. So, I mean, you don't have to, but you're ultimately going to deal with the alerts and the investigation from this portal. So this is a link that I want to show because this can be a little confusing if you're using it for the first time. So you'll see that those alerts are showing up here. All right, so that's a very quick sort of like a high level overview. And I'm just spending time that is sort of like aligning with the percentage coverage of this particular skill. So I think that's a good thing to do. But if you have any questions, put it in here. I know for some people it can be overwhelming. I teach this like as a 4-day course, and believe me, it's even complicated than CSPM, and it's a cross-platform, like a cross-cloud platform solution. So it actually does multiple things, right? So it's kind of a little broad in terms of like what it can do. So it can provide the perform protection with Azure, on-premises like a hybrid. You can also do AWS and Google HTTP resources security. So you can do all those, right? Now, basically the idea behind it is that you, again, tracking them, right? The idea is that you track them, you have the permission assignment, and then it gives you a visibility. And if you think about it, right, the 3 things that it does, right? It basically sort of like do the monitoring part and continuously assess them and create and surface the alerts. Pretty much similar theme, right, with all defenders, right? You have some sort of like a threat, identified, alert, incident, response. Same thing. It has the same idea of like a security score. So basically, the more things you can do to secure, for example, if you have an IS-based workload, it will ask you to install the like some sort of like an agent, so you can actually track. That's the most important thing. That how to make sure that you have some sort of like a visibility into your environment. And you have to have like a defend features, right? So basically, how do you defend against them? Should you basically ask admin to go and perform some action, things like that? So to give you a recommendation, basically. Now, how do you sort of like work with it and how it actually works? I quickly going to talk about it. Like there's a secure score feature I talk about, which basically going to monitor everything. Recommendation going to give you action items, and then the alert would be like literally triggering that, hey, you have to do something now to protect it. It actually does it across the board, so it's not necessarily just like Azure. So if you have a VM running in AWS and you install the agent, it will actually capture that too. So it's very broad, and this is sort of like a starting point. So the way you actually get to it, if you haven't really worked with it, then you basically enable it. There is a Defender, again, the license here, you basically go and enable it. You can again have a trial. So again, you don't have to pay extra. There's always a trial available for most of the services, and there's a trial for this. So you basically go and enable it. Once you enable it, it basically gives you the resource over there, like what resources you wanted to. There's a way that you onboard the resources outside Microsoft Azure. You can do that too. And then you basically bring them under the sort of like a visibility or guard of like Defender for Cloud. You enable them to give you sort of like a brief view here. And then it will start giving you this like a secure store. And again, this secure score is pretty much consistent across the platforms, that it basically give you like, okay, so you have recommendations. Unassigned recommendations just mean that you need to assign someone to review them and actually work on them. And the more and more you resolve them, the score actually going to improve. Right? That's the idea. And then there are recommendations that will come up that are not like being acted upon, and they will pile up and then they will reduce your score. That's sort of like the idea. It will show you here like a summary view. and then you can basically go and review how it's basically getting calculated, the unhealthy resources. Now, I can tell you based on experience working with like this service in the past, is that it's very comprehensive. So when you look at the recommendation, it will come up with the sort of like a proven practices, right? For example, if you're working with a VM, like if you have like lift and shift a VM in Azure or any cloud for that matter, right? It wants you to actually go and install a BitLocker on it, right? So it will ask you to do that, right? And if not, then it's basically going to have some sort of like a formula that it will reduce your score, right? It will basically ask you to have some sort of like a Windows Defender or similar capability product, right? So you can do that, and then again, you can see that there's a Google, there's account related, so it's a whole SKU, right? And most likely, like I'm not an expert in some of the third-party services listed here, so I need to work with someone. So I don't think in the exam you will get a questions like, hey, how are you going to do that? I think you will get questions about the capability, like how do you improve the security score, right? Or what would be your action plan to do it? I think you will definitely going to get questions on those lines. Now, again, how you calculate this score, the slide is actually a document you can read. You need to understand basic level how to calculate it, but I don't think you need to be an expert in that. That's not what this particular certificate is about. You do need to deal with the alerting, because alerting is where the remediation will kick in, because if you don't have an alert, you won't have an incident. If you don't have an incident, like I don't know if you're going to remediate it at all. And if you're working with, especially with the Azure platform, you will see some of the common themes here. Enable MFA, and then it will give you this sort of like a litany of recommendations right here, like, hey, you have to do this, right? And then these are basically overdue or they're completed, and then you go and mark them each. It's actually very intuitive, and because it's built into the Azure portal, it's a little bit easier to work with in the way of like a UX. But keep in mind that again, at the end of the day, it is part of the Defender product suite, so everything goes into the logs, so you can analyze them using the Custo. So how you actually do the reduction of threats is basically perform like this sort of like a collection. This monitors it. Most likely, in most cases, for the IaaS-based workloads, is going to be the agent. For the for the SaaS, is going to be a built-in connector, and then it basically gives you the logs, which you can analyze using Sentinel for most part for doing some sort of like a proactive threat intelligence on top of that. So you will see that throughout this course, like we'll talk about the MITRE attack. This is actually the matrix, and it starts from, it's sort of like a kill chain, like the initial access. You basically have the execution of some sort of like a malware, then they persist in your system, all the way till the end, which is like command and control. Now, this is actually the version 9 of it, which is the latest version of their attack matrix, and you can find it over here. It's also in the resources folder. Now, the exam itself doesn't call out the MITRE. I put it in here because whenever you're going to go and explore like the threats and vulnerabilities, it eventually comes down to some lingo, and this is the lingo. A lot of times when you look at the threat assignment, it will fall under this one. So it won't hurt if you familiarize yourself, if you not already have some level of familiarity with MITRE. It's actually very, very easy to understand this because if you're working in the security or generally in IT, you most likely have heard about these terms, right? And if not, then you can just see and logically connect together, right? If you have a ransomware, there will be initial access. They get into the system. You have to have some sort of like a malware installed, and they basically, encrypt. Then they're basically going to persist. They're probably going to move from one machine to another, which is called the lateral movement. And there's a lot of good documentation there too. So I put it in here for completeness. Not strictly part of the exam, but highly recommended to go through it. So how do you deal with the threats, and then how to deduct that? So whenever it's going to deduct it, will surface up here. And you can see that, again, it's pretty much like a summary view. And from there, you basically go in, and then you're going to basically perform more analysis. Now, one thing I would say, which is not part of the exam, but you're going to see in this, is the way Microsoft approaches this is like there would be a defender for containers, like Kubernetes containers right over here, right? So there will be a container defender. There would be defender for X for storage, right? So not all of those under the exam. So I won't recommend you to go and deep dive into them, but you will see that the more you go deeper, you will find that there will be a recommendation of like doing certain steps, and then the defender for that particular service provide that. So it's a little bit like an open-ended thing. I would say that you should just focus on the key things, right? Like how it detects threats, how you can improve your security score, and then perform the basic mitigation. I think that is a good, probably, I would say, way to look into this. If you want to go beyond that, perfectly fine too. You can do that. But again, remember, all of these are under a bucket, which are approximately 25% of the exam coverage, right? And this is just one or two of the items, right? So you wanted to sort of curve how much you wanted to invest your time. Okay, so the security alerts over here, and then the relevance here, if you can see the second last column, the MITRE attack tactics is going to show up over here. So if you ever wanted to look into what that credential access mean or the initial access mean, you go and review that for a PDF, and then you will see that it will be literally a box showing that what it is. And if you really wanted to dig into it, if you go to their website, it will give you. They also have how to deal with the threats based on the operating system, like Windows, Linux. Most of the time on the server side, you can actually review what need to be done. So generally in the security field, there. Right now, at least, these tactics are very, very well known. So we definitely wanted to have some command over them in general outside this exam too. Okay, there are a couple of questions here. Let me take them. Move on. So the question is about the guidance needed to prepare for the exam. Azure courses. Are you talking about the instructor-led courses, or are you talking about Microsoft courses? I believe you're talking about Microsoft courses. I can give you the link if you want. I just want to show that I understand the question. Are you looking for Microsoft in-person training? Is that? Yeah, let me know in the exam. So, okay, so let me see if I just give you a link here, and I will put it in the group chat if everyone need it. Okay, I put it also in the group chat. In case you're looking for it. If you actually go to that page, then it will show you both the free online. It's more like a documentation-based course. It's a course still, and then there's an instructor-led course. If you wanted to have someone sort of a behind your shoulder helping you with the labs and everything, literally methodology in a very methodical way, then that is the way to do it. But I think it's not. Instructor-led courses are not free, just to call that out. I would recommend to start with the online course on that portal, and then if you wanted to really go deep, then do the labs, and I will also share the links to the labs here now, so you can actually perform those. But if you really need help, if you're starting up and you're really kind of not even sure how to just go and sign up for the trial and things like that, typically if you're working with Azure, which is a prereq for this exam, you shouldn't have that challenge. But if you do, then you may want to take some Azure course first. I would recommend that. Okay, let me know if the response helped. If not, then let me know. I will. You can ask the question again too, more information. Okay, I do want to conclude on this. So I put in this here in case you just wanted to see how the alert work, their actions, and then you basically assign them. There is a okay, someone is asking, can I please get those links too? Yeah, I put them in the chat. I think that I don't know if I can put it in the group chat, but I will. Let me DM you right now. So I think I put it in the team chat, but I think it's just between me and the producer. Okay, someone asked me to send the links. I send them. Let me know if you get them. So you have Defender for Cloud Threat Intelligence. Basically, what threat intelligence do, it basically give you this sort of a capability to review a particular type of security threat in the form of alert. It surfaces it up, and then it basically going to give you more details about that. So to give you something like the indicators of compromise, IOC, like a URL, file hashes. If you work with like on a daily basis, right, or at least if your organization work with ransomware-based attacks or supply chain attacks, right? Usually there is indicator that comes up first. There's a lot of like tools for that. Basically, what they do is that they look at the file hashes, the URL used. The more visibility you have, what's going on in your environment, you actually have that, right? So it will give you that because remember, it's defending the entire like your range of services, right? And then it basically also give you like, for example, depending on the footprint of the attack, attacker's identity. Ransomware attacks can be anywhere from like just a naive attacks or all the way top notch, like a groups that run campaigns, multi-month campaign to basically infect users and devices with a malware, and then run the full ransomware campaign. So basically what happened is that you get all of this and you get basically a details. Now, again, the idea here is not to get too deep into it. The idea is that there's a capability that you need to invest more time. Okay, so let me see.